Hi, this is Emily Freitag, and I'm so glad to be talking today to Henrik Appert, the founder and CEO of Magma Math. Welcome to our tour, Henrik.
I'm so happy to be part of it, Emily.
We are, as we do with all of these interviews, excited to hear about you, about the product, and about its impact. So, why don't you start by telling us your own story? How did you come to be founder and CEO of Magma Math?
Yeah, I'd love to. We really started Magma from a point of identified need for better ways of achieving great outcomes in mathematics. Our kind of starting point was there came a PISA survey back in 2015, which showed that results in mathematics were really poor, not just in my home country, Sweden, but also internationally. So we got really curious about what does great math education look like and why are we struggling to deliver it at scale? And so a couple of things stood out to us. One was that in mathematics, we base our new knowledge on our existing understanding of the subject at hand. And that in turn has the implication for teachers that if they're going to have math lessons that are meaningful, they need to understand how their students are currently thinking about and understanding the math. And that's a very easy thing to say and a much harder thing to achieve when you have 30 students in a classroom that are scattered over a very broad spectrum of current thinking.
Mhm.
And so we got interested in, well, what possibilities are there for teachers to actually gain these insights in real time?
Mhm.
Because you need to do something about it in real time so you don't discover it when it's too late.
Mhm.
And then we looked at, well, what are the tools and technologies that are available for that? And we saw that there was nothing that really captured what we think is perhaps the most important piece of data, which is actually how students are thinking about the mathematics. How are they arriving at the answer, not just what is the answer? And so we saw that there was a possibility to maintain math as a very creative subject where students are showing their thinking and solving problems in ways that make sense to them. So still doing a lot of math by hand, if you will,
Mhm.
and then capturing it digitally using AI to do analysis, both to give students immediate feedback, but then also to give those insights to teachers. And so that happened back in 2015. And then we've been, starting from a very small scale and now grown to being active in more than 6 countries.
Very exciting. So bring us into the product. You've told us a little bit about what you hope it does at a global level. For a teacher, really, what problems do you hope it solves? And can you walk us through practical use? Where does this fit in? What happens while kids are using it? Show us what you want to show us as you describe this.
Great. Yeah, before we jump into a short demonstration of it, I think it's really important to start with what is the kind of like pedagogical philosophy behind anything. And so our pedagogical philosophy is really that the most important like learning resource in the classroom is the teacher. So how do we ensure that we give teachers superpowers?
Mhm.
The second most important learning resource in the classroom are students to one another, the peers. So we think a lot about how do we make students more connected to one another, and then we think about, well, what type of pedagogy is it we are trying to have more of. So we want students to be explorative and be creative and gain confidence in mathematics. And then we design our solution, our product, around trying to create more of those moments and removing things that perhaps don't add so much value, like teachers grading papers or things like that.
Mhm.
Um, and so, and to tie it to what I was telling you a little bit earlier about the importance of showing your work, what really makes Magma unique is the ability for students to show their work.
Mhm.
Before we started Magma, we saw that there were like teachers were saying things like explain your reasoning, show me your thinking,
Mhm.
but more or less every single digital tool just focused on what the answer is.
Mhm.
So perhaps what would be helpful is that I give you a very quick demonstration, both of the student side and of the teacher side and the district side. And then we can also talk whilst we're doing that about some of the pedagogical approaches that the technology kind of enables. And again, like it's all about how teachers are actually then implementing it in their classrooms, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later. But does that sound like a good jumping off point?
Yeah, it's a very unique product to see. So I think that's a good place
Great.
to start.
Let me start then by the student side. This is the student side. Students are presented with just one question at a time, so it's very easy what they're supposed to be focusing on. At the bottom here, it says show your thinking. So I'm not able to submit anything before I've shared my mathematical thinking. And we also try to make math more accessible to all students. So if there are students that speak different languages, you can translate it into over 140 different languages. And
¿Cuál es el área del rectángulo?
it also does text to speech. Did it read it through the browser for you as well, or didn't you hear it?
Yeah, we heard it loud and clear. And are
That's
you
great.
using a mouse? Like, tell us about, I know a lot of schools have Chromebooks.
Yeah.
How does this really work?
So it runs on any type of platform. I'm right now using a computer, a PC, and it of course runs on iPads, it runs on Chromebooks, it runs on PCs, so whatever type of technology it is that you're using. So I'm going to go back to English here. I might want to use the image as part of my solution. We can kind of circle this and see that this is 3 and this is 4. Now, let's say that I make a mistake here and say that like I calculate the area as 3 plus 4, and I multiply this by 2. So I get this to 14 centimeters. Ooh, 14 centimeters. I can circle this to show it's my answer.
And when you circle it, it automatically put that in the answer.
Exactly, as you can see down here. So now I made a mistake, and then based on my mistakes, I can also get hints from Lava. So removing some of those perhaps first line defenses or first line support tickets for teachers. So Lava can also like then point out where exactly did I make a mistake. So I might want to go back and see what I can do here. So let's see if we can improve on this. I might choose to just like undo some of these things. So maybe we go back to this and we actually think that we're gonna multiply these things. 3 times 4 equals 12 cm squared. And I can also down here, instead of circling, I can just write it down here as well. So 12 cm squared. And it understands my hand.
Too, if you wanted to type?
Yes, of course, you can type. You can do it any way you like. There's also a bunch of digital manipulatives that students can use based on the types of math that they're working on, Desmos calculators, and so on and so forth. So, but what makes Magma unique here is really the ability for students to problem solve this in ways that make sense to them. So let's jump to the teacher side of things. So right now we're looking at one of the screens that teachers have access to. This is an assignment that has been handed out by the teacher. On the left-hand side, I can see which students have received this assignment. I can see which problems are on this assignment. And this heat map, this grid view, gets filled out in real time as students are doing the work. So green meaning that they got something correct on the first try. Yellow that they got it after a couple of attempts. Red, so far incorrect. And so the point of this is to give teachers those real-time insights about, are there any individual students that are perhaps struggling a little bit? As well as, are there any problems that several students are struggling with? So like problem 4 or problem 9. And we can also here see that there's a common error. So something that a lot of students have struggled with. Now,
what happens when you click on that common error? Does it pop it up or?
Yeah, so I'll show you that in just a minute when we jump into it. But we think that already here, this is a great opportunity where teachers can have a more student-centered approach and drive more agency for students. So one thing that's really important in math education is that students are not afraid of making mistakes, and that they see mistakes as an opportunity to learn and actually grow. So what teachers can do is they can anonymize this, they can remove who's who, they can randomize the order, and they can actually share this if you have a digital screen in the front or a projector.
I saw that in the classroom,
And then they can ask the students, what do you all notice here? Like, what's the problem we should all like take a closer look at here? And so then they might say, well, problem 4 looks interesting, right? So we can click into this. And then on the left-hand side, I can see what was the problem. I can see the standard. I can see what the correct answer is. And then I can see all of my students thinking here. And you'll also notice that it's anonymized, since we anonymized it on the previous screen. I can, of course, still see who's who. And I can even here remove, like, if the answers are correct or not. If I want to have mathematical discourse about this, I can select and sequence various solutions where I might want to make some connections between something that's very concrete to something which is more abstract. And we can dive into this and look at not just the final work, but we can actually see the entire process for how they arrived at the answer. I can change the play up speed for how the students were showing their thinking here. I can pause this and ask the students, what do you think is happening next? And this also creates an ability for teachers to enable mathematical discourse, where what's being discussed isn't the thinking of the teacher or what's in the textbook, but actually the thinking of the students. And an even better like math practice here is having students to talk not about their own work, but to talk about the work of their peers. And that is really positive, both for the students' work that's being discussed, because they are being recognized as mathematicians, which builds their identity. And it's also really positive for the student who's doing the explaining, because it drives their conceptual understanding to decode and put words into how someone else was thinking. It's also a great way to ensure that all students gets to have their work being discussed, because if you're just asking students to volunteer, typically it's going to be the same 4 or 5 students who are eager to share their thinking. And while that is great, it's also really positive that all students' work gets to be talked about and gets to be celebrated. And then there's a bunch of AI features, like you can really quickly see which students have made mistakes, what were the type of mistake, how might I want to reteach that, getting AI supported discussion points. And then all of the problems are also connected to math stats, connected to the standard. So we can here look at the entire class and see, how did the class do? They struggled with this standard down here, but they typically did really well on this. And I can, of course, also look at this by individual students. So we can see that Dorothy did really well with create scaled bar graphs and calculate polygon perimeters, but struggled more with finding perimeter of rectangles. There's a bunch more of insights where you can also track progress over time. I'll end the teacher demo by just saying that as a teacher, you get access to material for all different grade levels. And the curriculum is aligned to your state standard, and it could even be aligned to your particular scope and sequence, given that we're working with your district. I'll quickly just go to the district platform.
That'd be great, because this is one thing that we've seen some products have and others don't. So I think it's useful that you all do this.
Exactly. So our goal really is to be the infrastructure that modern math education kind of runs on, where we start at the inception point of students thinking. And so as a district leader, you're able to actually track progress for various different grade levels, how they're doing across the year between different schools, and you can drill down into a particular school and see, okay, Dalton School is struggling much more than, for instance, Cedar Grove. And we can see that class B is doing a little bit better than the other classes here. And we can particularly see which standard should we be practicing more on, where do we perhaps not need to spend as much time. And you can also, from the district side, push out assessments. So you can see across various schools which problems were the most challenging. We can compare different schools to one another. So if I want to, for instance, compare Rivers, they had everything green here. Riverside to maybe Oakwood. We can also see how are they doing, and we can see by standard how they're doing as well. So there's a bunch more in here, but this is just like a very, very quick overview of how incredibly powerful the tool becomes when you're allowing students to show their thinking. You start with the pedagogy, and you're using AI and data for the things that teachers and district administrators shouldn't be spending their time on. So I'll quickly stop.
Paper collection teachers do to set up for a PLC, and there's
exactly
many.
And we're going this fall. We're going to be releasing a particular PLC tool, which is specifically designed for how do you drive PLC work using Magma. And to your point, I think it's a great example where PLC can go from being kind of fluffy and a little bit undefined,
and complicated
and it can
to manage,
and complicated, to being much more data driven and much more here was the thinking in different classrooms. This is the most common mistake that 30% of the students are struggling with. How can we reteach? How can we particularly reteach that? And then track the progress of like, okay, we did that. What has happened with that, a month later?
So let's go to implementation now, because it's a tool that has a lot of flexibility, which I'm sure teachers and students both value. But I'm so curious sort of what range of uses you're seeing. Are mostly people using it in their core math class? Do you have people using it in intervention? Do you have a sense of the routine of the lesson that you want it to be used in, or do you see teachers using it in very different ways?
So we see ourselves as a core enhancement, and we think that as I stated earlier, the most important resource is really the teacher and the students. So we go alongside whichever core it is that a school district is using. And the most typical use case is using Magma at least 2 times a week for parts of the math lesson. It could be for things like entry tickets. It could be things as homework. It could be things like a formative assessment. And it could be things like district-wide assessments. Those are some examples. And then it's also terrific for differentiating instruction as well, where you might start with an assignment to see what does the class know? And then with a click of a few buttons, the teacher can also then differentiate instruction. But I think exactly. And Magma can help you also suggest how should you put the groups. But I think what's really important is that we do not have this prescriptive model where we're saying use Magma for 30 minutes and put the kids on the program. We don't believe in that. We think it's much more important that the teacher is in control, but they are enabled to use technology to meet the students, particularly with what they believe each student should needs to receive. And which, as I said earlier, we try to make the classroom more connected, so that the thinking of one student can become visible and something to talk about in the classroom. That being said, so we are very particular with our implementations, and so when we do partnerships, when districts partner with us, we really mostly do district-wide implementations, and that's so that we also can, we ask districts to make an investment and a bet on us, so that we can make the equivalent bet back into the district. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin. We want to ensure that teachers have the onboarding, the training, and the support for how to meaningfully use Magma. And that's really one of the main reasons why we've had the success that we've had, where we've been able to, start from very individual classrooms in Sweden to now be serving classrooms in more than 6 countries.
And I think you're in more than 300 districts here in the US. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, more than 300 districts in over 40 states.
Okay.
So we have an ESSA2 certification.
Yeah, let's go to impact. Tell us what you know about the impact on student learning.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the $1 trillion question, right? What is the impact? And the super honest answer is that there is no definitive certain way of knowing what an impact is with or without, because there are no perfect trials where you can evaluate it.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have an SL2 certification, which proves the efficacy. There's another example that we have are so when we started, there was this school district in Sweden, or a school, I should say, socioeconomically very challenged.
Mm-hmm.
And they had fail rates on national standardized exams in year 9 by 55%, when the national average was about 18%. And then between 2021 and 2024, they used Magma for 3 years in a very systematic approach, where they every single week did like what are we going to work on this week? The teachers got insights, and then they used that to plan their teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And then they did exit tickets for the week to see like what had landed and what hadn't. And while the national average of fail rates went from 18 to 15%, they went from 55% to 5%.
Wow.
And again, like we're not like the ones who deserves all the credits are the teachers, because they put in the work to use a tool really efficiently. But we have other stories like this. So here I'm just showing some of the awards. We actually also won 3 BET awards at the last BET show, which was pretty cool. And we have a partnership with Apple, Building Thinking Classrooms, and the Gates Foundation. But then to some of our US results. So Alabaster showed a 40% proficiency growth within 1 year of implementing Magma. Florence 1 showed a growth from 46 to 81% fluency in Algebra 1. And Campbell Union showed a 3x proficiency growth on their iReady exams after implementing Magma. And there you actually had a control group as well, which is pretty interesting. And then there are other gains, things like how does it drive engagement for students? How much time does it save for teachers? So 71% of teachers says that they save between 1 and 4 hours per week. And about 1 in 4 say that they save between 15 and 60 minutes. And then I think the most important one is, do teachers feel that Magma makes them a more efficient teacher? And there 87% say that it makes them a more efficient teacher.
Where are you going next? Any edges in the product that you're working on, or are you leave us with your final thoughts on where you hope Magma will go?
So I did share a bit of a sneak peek regarding the PLC work. I mean, we are really working towards becoming the infrastructure that modern math education runs on. And I think my kind of like, I was in another interview just a day or two ago, and they asked me like, what would your dream headline be in a large paper? And I think it would be something along the lines of like, a country, let's say Sweden to begin with. Sweden has solved their math problem. Now other countries are lining up to adopt the same recipe. So we really define our business success by the success of our teachers and our students and our district partners. We think that if we focus on those outcomes, the business success will kind of follow. So and I think the way we achieve that is by continuing what we've already been doing, which is like listening so much to teachers, listening to students, being in classrooms, listening to our district partners, and then being just tremendous partners. Like we will own that the product is never done, the product is never perfect. We always look to improve, but we can promise that we are a phenomenal company, a phenomenal team to partner with. And if districts are looking for solutions to help change the outcomes in mathematics, I think we'd love to hear from them. Like outcomes in math are the single best predictor for future academic and professional success. It's really, really a great predictor for also how we level the playing field for students. So like, I think I'm so grateful to be doing what we're doing, because I think it's one of the best opportunities to have tremendous impact on coming generations and our society.
Thank you so much, Henrik, for showing us Magma and for the work you're doing and being part of this tour. And thanks for this interview.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Emily.